It's funny, actually, we just had another interview, and that person brought up that they were a racer. So I'd love to hear your racing story.
Well, it's not so much a story as a continuation. When you do a lot of, say, cutting edge work in the financial markets, you're always taking measured risks, right? Controlled risks. And a good outlet for that is the racetrack, except it's more immediate, right? You only have a nanosecond to make decisions.
Right.
And it's always about, managed risk when you do make a decision to do something or not on the track. So I feel like it's kind of an extension of what I did, but it also very cathartic because after you get off, completely, sweated through, but you're also completely relaxed. It's very interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
What type?
After a long day, right? Just to get that, stress out of your body and hit the track. I'm sure
Yeah,
it's
um, I've done it for many years, and um, there's a whole group of people that are all financial people that are on the racing circuit, um, which is really interesting, actually.
What type of cars do you race?
Porsche 911.
Very
very
nice.
nice.
Any favorite tracks on your end?
Well, actually, my favorite track's up in Minnesota. It's called Brainerd International Raceway, which is completely off the beaten track. They used to have races up there, but now it's just drag racing because it's so far north. But it has the longest straight of any road track in America. So when you come off of turn 10 and you start on the track, you have a mile long straightaway and then a banked turn and another quarter mile before you ever have to touch the brake. And it's a three
Wow.
mile course, so you're looking at a mile and a quarter of nothing but pure acceleration, plus the G forces of being in a bank turn. It's quite a ride.
That's awesome. How long you been racing, Michael?
No,
Sounds like
been going on 20 years now. Yeah.
what was the start of that? Like, what made you decide? Okay, this is going to be a great thing for me. Jumping into this.
Uh, a good friend of mine who runs an advertising company had the Porsche account, and
Okay.
so he started racing. So he dragged me along. Also, I grew up in Europe many years, and I always saw the there's no speed limits on the autobahns in Germany, so that's always been helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was really my friend who had the Porsche account and then just started doing these events, Porsche Club events, and then one thing led to another, and I was hooked.
That's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. So, tell us a little bit about Global Access Capital. What are you guys up to? Tell us about your business, and actually, maybe before that, give us a little background. How'd you start your career, and bring us to where you're at today?
Yeah, so I was one of those people who couldn't quite make up his mind, so I did a law degree and an MBA. And when I interviewed out of school, I interviewed on both sides. I interviewed with banks, and I got some offers from banks. I interviewed with law firms, and what developed out of that over time is this real passion for not just the legal side of finance, but the finance side of finance, and then the economic side of it. Because I went to the University of Chicago, and you can't really get out of there without a good dose of law and economics, right? So that whole thing became a passion for me, and so in the beginning, I went into a major law firm, in their banking and financial services group. I did a lot of structured finance work, for some really big clients. I started building a global practice, and did some really interesting deals for the likes of GMAC and Cargill and HSBC and Wells Fargo, um, and really enjoyed that part of it, and particularly the work I did with Cargill because they are very very innovative and hard charging and always had a lot of money to invest because the family made so much money in their other businesses, and they used the financial services arm to do something with it. Right. So we did some really interesting work, and over time, I became interested in like taking where I was to build, a new firm, a new brand, and a new kind of business that wasn't. So global access, is the result of a lot of experience of a lot of people that all have worked together in the past. Like at places like Carvel, which is a spin-off from Cargill. At places like HSBC and so forth, where and then other major players, where we just decided, what would it look like if we just did things our way, and build a business around our interests and interests of where we think the markets were going, and also at the same time have an impact. There's a lot of the threads that come together here, so I may spend a minute or two a little bit off topic on these threads, but these threads are important, to see where we are. So, for instance, earlier on in my career, before impact investing was a thing, I had a client who had worked for one of the original impact investors, who started this whole thing about micro lending, got the Nobel Prize for it, and decided that, well, they've done a bunch of micro lending funds, but they wanted to have a fund to make investments into the supply chains of the micro entrepreneurs, because you give them a little money, but then they don't have a way of fulfilling, they don't have a way of taking money. I mean, there's a lot of different issues there. And so we built this supply chain investing company called it Livelihood Impact Fund, which was literally a first of its kind. And interestingly, in that fund, we had interest not just from your regular financial investors, your regular LPs. We had a lot of interest from people that would have given money and wouldn't have made an investment. They would just make charitable donations in this sector. And some of those people weren't allowed to make money on the money they gave away. So the interesting part was, so all of a sudden I'm sitting there thinking, okay, really there is no precedent for having an investment fund do anything but maximize returns for people. Yet we needed to have a fund that could do that, but also could do something else and then could you measure that other thing? And that other thing was uh, making an impact on the actual livelihood. I mean, how well did these investments do to achieve the objective of the fund, not just in financial return, but actually on the underlying customers who are those micro entrepreneurs? So we came up with interesting. It took us. It was a lot of brain damage, but it made me look at the world. A lot of, first of all, it was the first of its kind thing, but secondly, it made me look at the world from more than one angle. And when we started Global Access, um, that was sort of in the back of my mind. It says, okay, we don't necessarily need to only make investments into things that have only a financial return. Why don't we look at investments that are double bottom line and favor those over other kinds of investments? Well, it turns out when you favor double bottom line investments, you can pretty much only invest in double bottom line investments, because there's a lot of opportunity out there to make investments that have an impact. And for our purpose, this impact wasn't something that we defined very narrowly or had a political motivation behind it. We wanted to make investment into things that perhaps other funds, other investors, maybe not as patient as we are, or who couldn't be as patient as we could be, um, uh, but were perfectly valid investments, and were almost like the kind of investment where you'd have to kind of build the business alongside with your partner, whom you invested in, right? So we built an ability to operate directly operate businesses along, because out of necessity, because a lot of these times when you found this incredible IP that could make a difference to something like a healthcare difference, or solves a big problem, it sometimes isn't in bad shape because it was mismanaged, it was buried deep in the dirt. It's sitting under litigation, and you have to do a lot of work just to get it to the point where other people might even have looked at it, right? And so we've done that. We've gotten our hands dirty in litigation to rescue IP. We've done all that kind of pre-work. But because of that, we've attracted a really interesting, really dynamic, really smart group of people that's around us, who love doing that kind of work, right? And it's been really an interesting journey. So I mean, that's a long way of getting to your answer about what we do. It's also in terms of the things we like to look at and like just where we'd like to make an impact, is this whole what I'll call tech infused innovation. Uh, where like application of technology in agriculture that's been on our radar screen for a long, long time. The application of technology to improvement in the healthcare sector, right? Can you do things with technology that would allow you to reach conclusions that you couldn't otherwise reach? I'll have to get it later. That you couldn't otherwise reach. Um, and so we spent a lot of time, just digging and looking and talking to people and trying to figure out where to position. It took us years before we made our first investment in any particular sector. Often because we look at so many things, and often by the time we do make an investment, we'll have looked at you know half a dozen or more businesses in that sector, to see if we could make a difference there. And also over time, we've developed sort of three segments to the business. So on the one hand, we're an alternative fund manager, a sponsor. On the other hand, we have an owned portfolio. So all of Global Access itself is kind of like a alternative investment fund. Um, and then we have what I'll call our consulting portfolio, but it's not truly a consulting portfolio. Right? It's a kind of portfolio where let's say you came to us and you said, "Gosh, we can't we can't build this fabulous technology we have out because we have to finance our customers, and they can't get to finance because it's too innovative what we're doing." So they'll come to us and say, "Well, so basically saying, can you build portions of businesses? Can you build our international operations? Can you build a captive finance company for us?" And the answer to that, depending on what it is, and if all our other criteria are met, is quite possibly. And often we like to work in a fashion where we get the assignment, we work with them, but in the end we build it and then hand them the key, and then also co-own it with them over time.
Very interesting. Maybe going back just a question, Michael, on you mentioned technology use cases in healthcare, some different interesting things. Do you have any specific, like high impactful things that you focused on regarding that narrative? I'm just curious.
Yeah, we do. One of the things we're very, very focused on is heart disease. You know, heart disease has gotten to the point where you hear a story about 35-year-old walking down the street dropping dead of a heart attack, or somebody on a fishing trip, 45 years old, dropping dead of a heart attack, 20-year-old kid on a basketball court dropping dead of a heart attack, and people say, "Well, I don't know how this happens. It's mysterious, but it's a heart attack." So, right, I think people have gotten immune to it, and yet heart disease, believe is the it causes 31% of all deaths any given year across the world. Right, it is literally the number one killer, but it's not treated like you know it has far more deaths associated with it than say some diseases that get a lot of attention and you shut down entire economies for, right? And you have to wonder why that is, and it's probably just because we've gotten inured to it, right? So we thought to ourselves, is there a way that we could get involved in that where we could make an impact? And is there technology, is there research out there where that could be actualized? So we spent some time and we started meeting with what we'll call leading experts, people who work in major medical centers, Cleveland Clinic, Mayo Clinic, you name it. And so we've been working with in that sector to bring a solution through a company we're working with to market. Okay,
That's
that
amazing.
has been a labor of love for quite a while,
Yeah,
and
early
we have a
detection.
significant amount of funds invested in that.
Yeah, wow.
But just to give you an example of how broadly we look at benefits, because so some of it is like that, but we've also took on um, I'll call it basketball equity, but it's not really equity in the sense that you think about it. It's just that the distribution of basketball fans and the infrastructure to support those fans is not evenly distributed, right? We have a lot of infrastructure and a reasonably large fan base in the US, but there's a much larger fan base outside the United States and not a ton of infrastructure to support that fan base with respect to US basketball, right? So we spend a lot of time on that as well. We got a contract from uh, a basketball organization, which I probably don't want to get into at the moment. Um, and we started down the path of could we do contracts with the Philippine Basketball Association, the Basketball Association in China, and other places to see about joint venturing to build this infrastructure. And of course, China is the key place for this because there's more basketball fans in China, U.S. basketball fans in China than we have population.
That's kind of crazy to
Um,
think about,
that's a crazy thing, right?
right?
Um, and so we thought, hey, this would be great both for cross cultural communication. Who can but who can screw that up, right? But of course you can. And in the old days, there was this whole mantra, people can disagree about many things, but they come together on sports. Well, that's not necessarily as true anymore as it once was, right? And it started with someone in Houston making it some comments that weren't liked in China, and then the U.S. China relationship deteriorating, and it ended with us losing a lot of money. But you can't be in this space, right? In this space where it's almost like adventure investing in some cases, because you have the goal of real return. Now we are starting to sponsor funds as well, a little more tame, a little less risk, a little more predictable. So that's why we separate the own portfolio from what we'll call the funds portfolio, because our own portfolio is a lot more risky and a lot more long dated, with not necessarily a near term exit in mind or in sight, right?
Yeah, definitely. So I guess coming into some of these investments that you mentioned like the basketball, the heart disease that you guys are working on. How do you guys go about finding these investments and interesting entrepreneurs to invest in?
Um, well, mostly they find us because there aren't very many groups out there that have the ability to do what we can do, or the patience, or the setup, or the know-how, right? Um, so we get a lot of referrals coming from many, many different places, not just domestic referrals, but also from other countries. On the own portfolio side, we tend to rely on the owners that we invest in a lot because we come in and do a lot of work to build things for them, but in the end we don't want to run it, right? We want them to run it. We want them to be incentivized to run it. We want them to run with the ideas, and once it becomes successful to then take credit for it, right? um, and so that's a unique position to be in too. People are not afraid of us, and they like working with us. Our biggest problem is that we can't take on even a small percentage of the things that people show us. Right? We spend a lot more time than we should on intake and on on vetting deals. We tend to also try to look, especially if the referral comes from people that we know, try to at least take a quick look at something to see whether it would fit, and or whether we could make a referral to somebody else that might be able to do this if we can't. Um, but finding the investment is also about focus, right? We like healthcare, we like ag tech, we like tech in general, and then we have different places we can put things. So, for instance, there may be an investment that'll work for our funds group, but or that will work as a consulting project, which if we liked enough, we could take on in those other areas, as opposed to putting it into our own portfolio. It's very hard at this stage for us to put anything more into our own portfolio. We're not saying we're closed on that side of the business. We're just saying that without a major expansion of that, we're kind of full up at the moment. But that's also a reason for why we're starting to focus more energy on the fund side. And there's sort of two reasons for that. One is that we have the excess capacity to do that, and then secondly, we have an area we are starting to focus on, which our partners have special expertise in. U.S. real estate and the commercial side, has not been a value play for a long time, I mean decades. Okay, and one of our partners ran was one of three portfolio managers and a founder of $15 billion value fund, and that focused on real estate and consumer assets. And we believe that we're in a market now where if not at the very moment, but soon, there will be the possibility of once again making value investments in U.S. real estate. And we have found we've already been approached by a number of family offices that want to partner with us. And so we've started exploring putting that together. We've soft circled some investors. We doing that in a more traditional limited partner, general partner format, simply because we can't we in order to do this properly, we have to have the on the ground decision making that you can't get if your group, if you do it as a joint venture, for instance, which we would have been open to too, but because of the interest we have, we think it's better to do it in a fund context.
That makes
Yeah,
sense.
commercial real estate's obviously something that everybody's kind of talking about recently. We've seen some real estate, commercial real estate obviously has fallen significantly in some regions of the country. Um, Talk to us about what interests you guys about commercial real estate. Where do you see the opportunities, and kind of how are you guys thinking about this new fund?
Well, we're excited about the fund. We're very excited about the fund. Um, there are there is enough dislocation in this marketplace that what what we're what we're seeing already is that there are people there are major pieces of real estate buildings changing hands at significant discounts. But if we were already in the market making those investments, we probably would not have made those investments yet. I don't think we don't think there's enough clarity to know, where the value actually lies, right? Clearly, it's better paying half or a little less than half for a building than paying full price for it. But you know, commercial real estate is a substitute for a bond in some ways, right? So if there's no cash flows, or you don't have a good visibility into where those cash flows are going to come from, it doesn't matter what price you buy it. So
Yeah,
from our perspective, we're looking for that, a portfolio mix where we can use the expertise that we have and the knowledge that we have in making value investments, to to make those decisions, more in an on the ground fashion. So, to say it another way, we don't think there's enough value yet to launch the fund. Okay, we think that value is coming, but we don't know what that exactly is, and so that's why we've soft circled our investors. If some of them may be impatient and they want to invest sooner, that's up to them. But if they want to invest with us, we're going to do what we always do, which is have a very sensible approach to this. Um, and there's plenty of product. I mean, there's so much commercial real estate that's been dislocated. Um, and you can also look at some other countries, where for a while real estate looked like a bargain and it never recovered enough to make a return for the investors in the way that they thought they could get a return, either because of government regulations or um, or markets just being in a place that aren't can't support the prices you would need in order to make. There's a lot of different reasons, but we think that this is an exciting time to look at real estate. And I know that there's a lot of other investors, because when we get into something, we also spend a lot of time talking to people. Right? There's a lot of other investors looking at the same time and with similar thoughts to what we have. So it'll be interesting to see what consensus emerges. Particularly, I love this concept called adaptive reuse. Um, which you first saw sort of in the nursing home space, where there were hotels that were underutilized, so somebody adaptively reused them into nursing homes with, say, memory care or something.
Mm-hmm.
But I think those same concepts are some people are already starting to apply to downtown buildings, right?
Yeah.
And the other
Yeah.
thing that's very hard to get your arms around in that respect is, how are the downtown trends shifting, like in your particular city? Because it's going to be city by city, right? Um, are businesses going to be using less space? Is it going to be more community living driven? Is there enough? And then what does that mean for? And what does that mean for the businesses that have to surround that? There's different support, right? Um, so I think this is to be looking at this now, to kind of sketching out your vision of the future, and then to invest accordingly. I think it's just an exciting time. But this is no different than a lot of other stuff that we do, where we're looking at a piece of IP and thinking, geez, this is a really ugly lawsuit that it's involved in. Do we really want to take that on and try to dig it out, right? But it's the same thing. You have to make decisions under some conditions where it's not going to be clear enough. So what you have to do is you have to get in at really good prices, because you have to build a cushion in for that uncertainty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are you guys looking for in terms of your buy signal? What do you think? What are you kind of looking for in the macro or more micro side of it? Like what will be your signal to start making these purchases and launch this fund?
Well, we probably wouldn't launch it until after the presidential election. But that aside, we think that, well, one of the things we might look at is residential housing, like not homes but apartment buildings.
Like converting?
Not even just in converting. There are a lot of apartments on the market. I mean, being built. I mean, if you look at the statistics and you compare that to other years, I mean, the amount of building that's been done over the last 3 years is just enormous, right? And that's a sector where you don't really expect a lot of contraction, because there's such a demand for living space. But I think if that sector started to show some weakness, because a lack of jobs, a lack of affordability, a lack of, I think that would be a major signal for us, to, and then also on the side of commercial buildings, I won't go into exactly what we'd be looking at, but um, there's already a lot of pain there, right? And people already know that banks are sitting on portfolios that don't look like they're going to be able to be refinanced. So, and then the question is, what happens to liquidity in the banking sector? Janet Yellen says, "Geez, well, we got this," and I'm thinking, well, you didn't have it in the past. Maybe you don't have it now either, right? Um, so, so we're thinking, okay, well, if with all this pain in there, I'd like to see a few signs of recovery. So we don't necessarily have to buy exactly at the bottom, right? We'd like to see some ideas being put that actually seem to work. You can't just turn, a commercial building into apartments. It isn't built for that, right? There's way too much interior floor space, and you name it. Some buildings will work, but a lot won't. Um, so we'd be looking at a lot of different factors, space utilization by employers, return to work trends, the tons of things. It's a little bit like looking at stock signals in a way, right? Um, yeah, so that's kind of where we are on this. We'll continue to soft circle our investors until we think we're within 12 months of launching. I can tell you that. Okay.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So yeah.
Yeah, I was
So
going to say, go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, go
I
ahead.
just ask, there's a lot of this is pretty interesting because you have a lot of different buckets and research and things that you're doing, looking into trends and opportunities in real estate, obviously heart disease. It takes a lot of resources. It takes a great team and insight into the space. Or what does the current management structure look like for you as a team? Even globally, you mentioned some stuff you're doing globally as well. I'm just curious, kind of the makeup and how you kind of focus your efforts here.
Oh, thank you. That's actually a great question, because we spent a lot of time on this. How can we stay um, focused, without, but have the ability to do a number of things, without kind of being dragged in too many directions at the same time, right? So we've created this sort of cross business team whose sole job it is to look at the portfolio of things that we do as a whole, right? Say, okay, across everything we're doing, how does this fit, right? Do we have enough resources and enough expertise to take this on, right? It just so happens that all of us have had a career, I've done a lot of mortgage structured finance, and some of the guys ran these value funds, and others, we've all had mortgage related experience, lengthy mortgage related experience. Um, I was Treasury counsel for internal Treasury counsel to GMAC ResCap during the financial crisis. That was a 120 billion balance sheet of mortgage related assets that had to be managed. Um, and so real estate is an easy one for us. We've even done Italian um, charged off mortgages. We have a capacity to do, so that's an easy one for us. Where it gets harder is, where we have an interest, but I don't know how deeply we would go in something like that. So like alternative energy sources, right? We so the, so there so we have to look at this on a sector by sector basis. We know that we can really do a good job in healthcare. We can do a good job in ag tech. We know technology generally, but we wouldn't do everything in technology, right? Um, uh, and uh, and outside of that, financial assets. because the structures for financial assets are very similar, and we really know financial services. And I would classify real estate almost as an adjunct to that. Right, but that is currently where we're focused, and where our team has their expertise. And one thing we have never done, which is also really interesting, in 10 years, when most of our team's been together for that whole time, we have never taken a vote at the executive management committee. We've always done everything by consensus,
Very
because
interesting.
I don't want to ever silence a voice that says, "Geez, we really shouldn't be doing that." It's like that whole idea of the tenth man. Well, maybe the tenth man ought to be taking the contrary opinion just to see if that you got this concept right, right?
Yeah, you need a little bit of pushback in the team to kind of give you a different
Yeah,
perspective, a different
absolutely.
lens, right? Yeah,
So we don't want to talk over anyone, and we don't want to vote over anyone. We really want to reach a conclusion, because for us to get involved in the business is that's an enormous undertaking, because we're not a very large firm, and we get deeply connected into what we do, and with our customers on the one hand, and our companies on the other. Um, so it's none of our what's in our portfolio. We look at as trivial, and nothing that goes in is we do it in a trivial manner. And we also don't do minority stakes for that reason, right? We do control or shared control investments.
yeah. I'm sure probably conversations with your team have been interesting over the years, just as you look at projects, and I'm sure there's probably maybe a little bit of back and forth, and like, do we do this, do we not? Everybody has an opinion, but that's a good thing, I think. But it gives somebody different perspectives, and
Well,
obviously,
you should have been there when some of our younger people tried to get us to get into Bitcoin mining about 6 or 7 years ago. That was an interesting discussion. We ended up not doing it, and maybe that was the wrong thing to do, but we ended up not doing it.
so you say consensus across the team. What was the split? I'm curious, based on who said yes, who said no, and was it pretty close? Or
Well, in the sense, there was a faction that composed of younger people and our then CTO who really wanted to do it.
sure,
And they presented these things where if you just put them into these containers and you put them underwater and you put them next to a power plant, somehow something good would happen. and and I really enjoyed the debate, but we could never get to consensus on that. And after a while, after some years, that particular CTO left, and I'm kind of wondering whether he's just out there, doing Bitcoin mining.
you never know, right?
You never know. Absolutely. He was definitely a smart cookie, so I wouldn't put it beyond him to have just gone whole hog into it.
What are your thoughts currently on the capital raising market?
Well, no, there's a good question. Our basic view is that there is. So we're project people, okay? We're not. While we know a lot about financial stuff, we're not financial investors, and and we think that what the world doesn't have is enough good projects. There's a lot of money chasing a lot of things, but there aren't enough good projects out there. And we view ourselves as being in the business of creating good value, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's real estate, it doesn't matter, right? And frankly, we like this idea that capital isn't necessarily easy to get to at any time, simply because it's a pushback mechanism, right? Mark is basically saying if you have trouble raising capital, it's basically saying maybe your approach isn't right, maybe you should think about it harder, maybe you're in the wrong business, right? We take that as a signal very seriously when we get that kind of pushback. So our view is we should, because of our partnerships, because of our track record, we should be able to find the capital we need. We wouldn't put it into our company. Would put it into it would go directly into the companies, right? If they're raising capital, um, and then with the fund, that's a whole different thing, because we haven't had any real issue in talking to the kinds of investors that we think would make these kinds of investments. We have a number of soft circles, now, and just actually brought a person on board who well, hasn't signed yet, but getting close, to kind of fill out the rest of that, because to see, what makes sense in terms of a target size for that fund, right? Um, but the current fundraising environment isn't great because asset values are in flux and nobody knows what to pay for them, right? And management skills is always the thing, right? Everybody looks like a great manager when everything is going up, right?
Very true.
Right. But we in some ways are the guys who find the value that's been buried by someone who wasn't able to create value out of it often. And so you know the combination of a good business plan, the right people to execute on it, and the ability to pivot over time to make an asset more valuable over time, you know um, and to have the reputation for sticking with it and not running at the first sign of trouble. Um, and those sorts of things make us a very attractive partner, whether it's for on the operations side, whether it's on the financial side, whether somebody's looking to invest in one of our businesses. Um, so, so I guess for us, it's going to be business as usual. We'll just keep doing what we're doing, and we believe the capital will be there. We haven't had any issues, but we're about to find out too, because one of our companies is about to go into the market to get some additional capital. So we'll see how they'll fare.
Yeah, that's
But it's
interesting.
definitely not an easy environment, because people are used to just investing in ideas that can create this value. But a lot of that and especially if you're talking about family office investors, you know, we're a great partner for them because we are their operating partner, right? If they need one, we're not just advisors, and frankly, they build businesses, we build businesses. There's a kind of natural affinity, between us.
Yeah, for sure. This is interesting. I'm curious, just kind of going back to a couple things you said, which has been pretty fascinating. Kind of how you guys think about things, how you research opportunity. Obviously, the return on investment is pretty easy to quantify. You mentioned something earlier about impact outside of the financial aspect. As an organization, how do you think about that? Um, Making an impact outside just a return based on opportunities for investment, right? I'm just curious.
Well, I think that as an organization, I won't say it's a litmus test, or that we wouldn't make any investments that don't have a particular impact. Um, but I will say that most of our own portfolio, um, and most of what we do, is trying to bring. So we might even take on a project on a consulting basis where we may not get paid because, but if the thing works, it's going to be a great thing for everyone, right? Right. So we have that ability to do that because we don't have constituents other than ourselves. It's going to be different, when it comes to the real estate fund and some of the other funds we're working on. But when it comes to our own portfolio, it's nice to be to have the ability and the patience of the owner, and to structure our investments um, alongside the owners that are building things. And then often we invest with other owners who are successful owners and have built businesses and who like to invest with us because we have that same approach, right? But impact makes a difference to us, right? If we can make a dent in heart disease, what is that? That to us that would be fabulous, even if it's not a great impact, right? But how many lives do you have to be part of saving before you can say, "Geez, we made a difference"? I'd say one, right?
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
Yeah. And it's the same with our ag investment strategies, because there, you got all kinds of issues. You got water in the wrong places. You got farmland getting less. You've got populations growing nowhere near food, right? Food security, huge issue across the planet, right? Can we be part of a solution in a world where food security is an issue, and not just because of wars, but because of droughts, because of famines, because of bugs, because population growth, because water resources are rivers are polluted, right? I mean, can we be part of a solution there, or in ag just like in healthcare, there could be many different ways to be part of a solution, and so we are working our way through that. Um, and there are no simple concepts. I mean, wars have always been fought over resources, and we also think there's a possibility that if the need gets bad enough, in places, there could be some conflicts that arise over food distribution. Already, damming up rivers, right, is causing huge potential conflicts in some places, right? So so we don't need to solve all of that, but if we can solve, a piece of it that makes a difference, and be part of solutions, or supporting the people and the groups that are doing the thinking on this, we're definitely interested.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Even just you kind of talked about just taking on a project without getting paid for it. I mean, just the knowledge share, probably the insights and trends you guys see based on all the conversations you have is probably helpful too.
I'll tell you, we don't do that very much,
Yeah,
but I like the fact that we have done it and we have the ability to do it,
yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Really cool way to give back. What are some of the biggest opportunities that you see in the market?
Let's say again. I'm sorry.
What are some of the biggest opportunities that you see in the market? Just in general, it could be, like different sectors or different types of investments you're seeing, but, kind of what are you seeing out there as, some big opportunities that you'd like to be involved in?
Um,
Maybe not that you see today, but you're currently working on like real estate and
well,
things.
the biggest one I'm personally seeing, which I really haven't. I mean, our portfolio companies are starting to think about how to incorporate, but it's AI, right? AI is both a huge risk and a huge promise. I've been starting to write about it on LinkedIn, as you probably know, um, and um, and we've been doing a lot of work in that area because we're equally afraid of it as we are believing that we need to be, on the cutting edge of that, right? When you look at what happened with Google Gemini, for instance, right? It may be that Google has to scrap the whole thing and start over because once the training is in there, I don't know how you get it out because they don't even really know how the AI works because to generate the things that it generates. So 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 once it's trained wrong, and I don't have a political opinion of what wrong is, but my bias would be to like just take the library and just put it in there, right, without giving it any kind of way to think
Context.
about it, right?
Yeah.
um, but I have to say, so what does that even mean? And look what happened to the stock price of Google with the Gemini issues, right? And that's just a glaring example. We tested out um, the AI by just giving it. I had to write a speech on something, so I said, "AI, write me the speech," and it did. It took it about 5 seconds, and I thought, and maybe a little longer because maybe it was 5 seconds each iteration. But let's say I did 10 iterations, and after that there was a thing, right? I started going through it, and trying to say, okay, could I put my name on this? First of all, I couldn't cite anything because I had no idea where it got the information that it got. So there's this whole idea of how could I intellectually take somebody else's ideas because I didn't know it was the AI's idea or somebody's idea that it grabbed, right, or a derivative of somebody's idea. That was the first problem. Second problem is that it's smooth. It's smooth in a way that like associates in law firms are, um, or junior analysts who are very competent and very smart but not very experienced, so they can go down a path, and write something that looks professional, It's well reasoned, but completely wrong, right? And then and this is exactly what we got back from on that speech. I had to scrap it because it took me more time to say, okay, well, is this really the way what I should be saying? Because is that really true, or is that just like something it wants to be true, right? And I said, there's no way I can
Right.
deal with this. So where I think it's clearly beneficial is in things like large document review things, things that repetitive tasks that it can sort through in a quick way. But I also think that the real juice in it is coming, which is, you know, doing tasks that we as human beings are doing, but doing them in a way that frees us from having to do this um, more mind-numbing work, right? And whether it can go beyond that, I don't know, because we're still talking about the old computer model, which is GIGO, right? Garbage in, garbage out. and
Right.
and it is not like there's a thinking engine in there. It's just GIGO, right? It's just a lot of GIGO. So you put in what you put in, and then it does whatever it does with some algorithms. But it's still, and that is both the promise and the problem. So, but do I want to build a healthcare company now, like with dealing with our healthcare company? For sure, we're building AI into it, right? For sure, right? But then the larger societal question, the larger question about, does AI seep into our governance? Does it seep into company governance? Does it seep into control systems? You know, let's say, does it become the arbiter of, hey, you want to make a statement, and maybe it doesn't pass social muster on some platforms, and is the AI the one to say, geez, no, right? And what's the implication of that, right? And if I'm the platform owner, what the hell do I do now? um, and so it's just, to me, AI is going to be an industrial revolution unlike any we've seen before. More transformative, faster, and with fewer guardrails. Because
Yeah.
as human beings, right, we're going to be out we're going to be outmanned by the computing power. And if we don't know where the results are coming from, we accept them. What are we saying about ourselves?
Yeah. Very true. Yeah. It's definitely fascinating to see just the exponential growth of change in technology with AI and with a lot of different things happening. I'm assuming when you were giving your example, you were talking about ChatGPT or uh, the commercial use thereof. But yeah, so it's interesting because there's other systems and tools. But to your point, how do we ethically and thoughtfully think about how to integrate things that make sense based on the best impactful use case of our business, of our lives, of society. All these things come up, right? And all these implications, cross stream, downstream, upstream, as to what it looks like future state. And it's like getting in a plane, um, being half built and getting off the runway, and now we're flying, trying to fix everything in real
In
time,
flight,
right?
right?
In hopes that we don't crash.
You better
That's
hope you
kind of
brought your tool belt.
right, right. And
Yeah.
yeah, we're
No, I
scrambling trying to
totally
get
agree
things
with
working.
you.
Yeah,
But I also think that for us, if we're going to add something to what it is we're already doing, it's that, because it's a thing for itself, but it's also a thing that affects everything else,
right.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. But by the way, Michael, there's one platform, Perplexity AI, that actually references the sites, citations, and data of any resource that I've used in the past. It might be one to check out as well, just as
Oh, I'm happy to
a
do
side
that.
note.
So,
Yeah,
so this is the AI trying to figure out how some other AI use something in its algorithm to get to something so they can cite it. Oh,
whole new
I
world.
definitely will. I will definitely look at that.
Yeah, yeah, because I some of the things you're talking about, and I'm kind of we've gone down the rabbit hole personally on a few things there. But yeah, it's fascinating. I think it's to your point. There's a lot of things that need to be worked out, but it is the future. It's not going away, and we can't put our heads in the sand, right, and just say, okay, well, we'll see what happens. We have to be thoughtful and take a look at what's happening real time.
Right, we're looking at applications that can help our companies, and we are studying AI to see whether there is something that we feel like our approach, our team can make a difference. And we have reached no conclusions on that.
Yeah. Well, I think just even looking at it now, I mean, I think that's a smart approach for many. I think some people are just decided to kind of wait and see, and some are like, hey, we have to take a look at it now with the idea of whatever that looks like down the road. We have to be involved as to what that is future state. Yeah, awesome.
Cool. Any other topics you want to dive into while we got you here, Michael?
No, I think we're in good shape here. I mean, I'm happy to answer more questions because I find that this is endlessly fascinating. Taking a look at the world from the perspective of, what value can you create? You know, as that has been something I've enjoyed my whole career, and now, doing it in our own firm, with our team is a fantastic privilege.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's great. Well, this has been great, Michael. I think kind of just some unique things you said. The impact of value creation with, I guess, with true impact and what that means for you and your team, and how you've kind of experienced that in different sectors and opportunities, and how you continue to look at things with a different lens and have internal debates about what we're going to do next, and having everybody's almost like a brain trust. Like how do we best move this thing forward? What does it look like? What are the pros and cons? What shouldn't we do? What should we do? And then have the decision, as to collectively as a group what we're going to do going forward. I think that's kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, Michael, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for joining us. Where could people go to connect with you and learn more about your company?
Probably the easiest way is either on our website, globalaccesscsg.com, or on Global Access LinkedIn page, or on my LinkedIn page.
Amazing. Yeah, we'll make sure to put those all that in the show notes of the episode. That's great.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. You guys are great.
Yeah, we appreciate it, Michael. Thanks for having taking the time as well.